Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor of Ultiworld, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Raynor, and it is currently 2:48 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, March 25th, and that means that the NBA trade deadline, Keith, is 12 minutes away, and we're going to have Twitter open during this recording as we see the final dominoes fall. We're still waiting for some big news. But a couple of big trades so far. Aaron Gordon from the Magic to Denver, and Nikola Vucevic to Chicago. Kind of your biggest names on the board so far. Keith, what have you thought of the deadline trades thus far?
The first thing that comes to mind is that we're all very thirsty as NBA fans because we're like salivating over, pseudo rotation pieces getting moved around. We're like excited that JaVale McGee is going somewhere or whatnot. And it's like so minor, but those are probably the two biggest names. And it's fun. And I wish that you could capture some of the same energy in Ultimate somewhere. And it doesn't exist because there's, obviously the semi-pro leagues are not in a position where players are contractually obligated to teams or their rights are belonging to teams or whatnot. So there is no exchange of value for players. And yeah, there's some player movement in Ultimate, and that's kind of interesting, but it's not nearly the same as the franchise building that I really think there's a subsection of sports fans, NFL free agency, also just going on. There's this, you got the March Madness going on. So people are talking about the prospects for the NBA and the WNBA. These kind of things are missing, unfortunately, from the grander Ultimate landscape.
And it is what it is. Finding out who's moving where is still interesting in Ultimate. I do think, someday we may have at least small trades happening in, let's say, the AUDL. I think more realistically is that we'll have some sort of draft. I feel like that drafting is more likely to happen before you have major trades. I mean, obviously, there's just not enough money going around right now for trades to be a real thing. People aren't going to uproot their lives to play for the Philadelphia Phoenix instead of the Raleigh Flyers or whatever. But I agree. I mean, it's fun to think about. It's fun to think about what kinds of trades teams might make if they were able to make trades. And, maybe someday, Keith.
We've talked about it either on the show or we've written articles about it. It's been so long I get confused, or maybe we didn't even get to that point. But I know we have conceptualized, club teams making trades and what teams would benefit from what assets, who's a buyer, who's a seller. Those conversations are a lot of fun, and they really drive a lot of contextualizing and evaluation of players and teams. And they get fan bases excited, and it would be cool to have that kind of thing somewhere in the Ultimate landscape at all. Maybe we'll see, maybe the semi-pro leagues could run like a tournament where it's like players are ranked, kind of a hat tournament thing. And then there's, this idea like could exist somewhere, where you have, I think I floated that running the semi-pro leagues is like a hat tournament style thing. Like you did a draft each season and started all over. And then, during that season, you could have trades and stuff. I don't know. It's hard for me to see a draft making sense because, why would a player choose to go to whatever team drafted them? There's like no actual incentive, unless the league mandated it, which they can't really. Incentive. And if they were in a situation where they could mandate it, then you're in a situation where players they're having their rights traded anyway. So to me, they seem just as likely as one of the other. Right?
Give them $5,000 for a signing bonus.
That maybe I could maybe see enough.
That. Like if a player was already thinking about moving, or they were open to moving, and they just what if a player went out and they sold all of the franchises in the league? Hey, they have to be good, obviously, but a good player. They say I'm sick of where I'm living. I want to move. Let's say they live in Denver, so they're not in a place with a franchise, and they say I'm ready to move, and I'm accepting all offers. I mean, you could have teams actually have a bidding war and have like sort of a real free agency scenario. Because we've seen in the past, teams have been willing in certain cases to pay some real money. I mean, Bo Kittredge got a couple big contracts back in the day. Kurt Gibson played for San Diego for a couple years. And there are other examples. New York has signed a bunch of players and like helped them out with jobs and housing. So there are creative deals happening already. And I think it would be very cool if somebody was, really committed to playing Ultimate, but didn't have a particular place that they wanted to live. And they said, hey, who's going to, somebody make me an offer I can't refuse.
Well, here, how about this for an idea? What if there's a league fund, they set aside some amount of money and then they have a draft. And if the player plays where they are drafted, they get the signing bonus, but the league pays it. It just comes out of the pot for the league drafting. So there's a little bit of strategy in like you're trying to draft players who you think will actually want to play for your franchise. But you may not want, you obviously don't want to pick somebody who's going to play for your franchise anyway, because then you're just giving them extra money that you could, get out of your own pocket rather than from the league or whatnot. But, it could be an interesting little tool to spice up what a draft process could look like.
Well, we'll have to see what comes of drafts, and we'll keep our eye on Adrian Wojnarowski's Twitter feed for the rest of the next 6 minutes as we get ready for the end of the trade deadline. The big news in Ultimate this week just came out today. USA Ultimate has established full plans to hold a college series in the fall. So we were talking about this more in the hypothetical a week or two ago here on the show, and now it looks like it's actually going to be a thing. In October, I think there's 4 weekends in October that are going to be set aside for conference championship events. Regionals will be held before Thanksgiving, and then on, I think, 3 weekends. And then Nationals is expected to be held in December. No location or dates yet specifically set for Nationals, but the ball is rolling for a full college series, and it's going to be pretty inclusive of players. So players that are incoming freshmen and anybody that has eligibility in spring 2022, including players who have graduated from college and are no longer enrolled in the last year and a half, I guess. I mean, so if you graduated between spring 2020 and this spring, you will be eligible to compete with your team if your university or college allows you to play, even though you're not enrolled. So we're going to have a scenario where we have, super teams with potentially like 7th year type players, as we discussed. And it really is going to come down to what are the rules, what are colleges allowing in terms of travel. But Keith, College Ultimate looks like it's coming back in a big way starting in October.
Right. Someone in our Discord, I believe Tanner Jurek, noted that fall college is a bit of a misnomer because we're going to be playing in October, November, and December. So perhaps a winter wonderland for college is more what we're thinking. And speaking as someone who coaches College Ultimate in Connecticut, I can't say that I'm super excited about the prospect of trying to be outdoors in November.
Hang on.
I'm excited to play.
When do you normally stop having practices for your college team in the fall?
Before Thanksgiving break, like right around Thanksgiving break. However, we are indoors at that point and have been since like maybe a month or two into the year. We've already been transitioned indoors at that point.
I mean, it's not that cold in the New York metro in early November. It's not. You're almost never going to have snow. I mean, look, is it ideal for the northerly regions? No. But regionals in early November is doable basically everywhere in the U.S. except maybe like the upper Midwest, Minnesota. But you just hold regionals in Iowa or whatever. And it's probably going to be cold, but it's probably not going to be snowing.
And there's no ideal solution for everyone. I mean, even when we hold regionals at the regular time, there's people who complain about it. It's on graduation, or you get to the tournament and it's really windy or rainy or whatnot. Like, something's going to go wrong anyway. It's not like you can wait for the perfect weekend because it's just not out there. So this is, I think, the best solution, even if it's not a solution that gives everybody a level playing field or whatnot. We've also seen discussion in our Discord about some of the potential pitfalls or some of the questions rising up around this. I mean, the first reaction is it's exciting that College Ultimate can be back. It's been a long time. We've all missed it. We've been doing these Twitch streams where we're often watching College Ultimate. It's like, man, I really miss this. But at the same time, I think there are also questions about what does it mean? There's already questions in the Discord about what do you do with this 2021 nationals? Like, is nationals even the right term for it? Are you going to look at this national champion the way that you would the others? Should they be included in records like they would? If Colorado wins the national championship in the men's division, are they adding to their trophy case, so to speak? Or is it a fake title or an asterisk title, whatever you want to look at it as?
Good question.
Those things I think are questions we're going to be asking.
I mean, that's a really good question. I think the expanded eligibility and the inherent imbalance that's going to create, because there's surely going to be schools that don't allow their graduated players to compete, that is probably going to put an asterisk on this no matter what you do. Obviously, also, this is going to be a big benefit to schools that pick up talented freshmen who are kind of college ready and don't need a lot of learning time, because you're talking about having maybe 8 weeks to get players integrated into the team, the offense and the defense before you're at regionals. So if you've got brand new freshmen, they're probably not even going to get run at regionals if you're a highly competitive team that's trying to make it to the national championship. So yes, asterisk 100%. What you should do about records is an interesting question. I think my gut feeling says you just include it, and it's COVID and it's weird, but that's just how it is. I mean, every other sport has counted their championship, and I know it's not the same as a professional sport, but NBA bubble, that was weird. Major League Baseball season, super weird. They did a bunch of strange rules, expanded the playoffs. NFL expanded the playoffs. I think it was a weird year, but ultimately it felt like fun competition, and I think we're going to see the same thing with this, fall championship.
I may be a little more skeptical about counting everything the same way that you normally would, and it's tough for me to imagine losing your regional title streak because you had to field a different team than you normally would, or maybe your team doesn't even go to regionals this year and you're traditionally a regional power. And now it's like there's this year where your team didn't go, or the same thing when you get to like the national level or whatnot. And it's going to be a little tricky. And I think you're going to really see a pretty wide gap between the haves and the have-nots here. And you mentioned the benefits of getting Ultimate Ready freshmen. Well, guess what? Those are often the same programs that are also taking in the top end fifth years, or that have the alumni networks to reach back out and have people return to the team that are now eligible to play. It'll be very weird. There's no way around it, and that's fair given the conditions that we're in. When's the last time anything was normal? So the new normal is abnormal, and that's the way it is for this fall college season. Hopefully it goes off and we can manage to play. To me, that feels like the most important thing, is giving teams a chance to play, a chance to see each other, and a chance to kind of put down their roots and start moving forward, because it'll, if you're going to have nationals in December and then have a month off and boom, it's time to get prepped for another season and a regular season that may not have an asterisk on it.
I mean, in theory, it shouldn't.
We'll see what happens when we get there.
Yeah, of course. Real quick, JJ Redick to Dallas. Keith, Lonzo Ball not going to get traded out of New Orleans. My Knicks were thinking about making a move, but they didn't. Andre Drummond going to get bought out from Cleveland. Really interesting to see where he ends up. But no news yet on Kyle Lowry. That's the big one. Okay. So, elsewhere with this, you can check out the article on UltiWorld if you want to read a little bit more about what's going on with this fall college series. There's still a lot of details to be worked out. And I think there's still uncertainty. I mean, at the end of the day, if colleges are not allowing teams to travel in the fall, well, then you don't have a series. So we have to see what will happen on that front. We today are going to be talking about rule changes. We haven't done a rule changes show in a while, and we got a bunch of responses from listeners and people on Twitter, in our Discord for Full and Plus subscribers, with ideas for rule changes. And we'll also refresh everyone on what the new rules actually are. Don't forget, their new rules went into place at the beginning of 2020.
I need this refresher. I almost feel like
people have never played with these rules.
I don't know if I remember the old rules. It's been so long since I played Ultimate.
I mean, nobody actually knows the rules, right? Raise your hand if you've read the rule book.
Is it part of the rule book that you can just kind of make it up as you go? Like, that's the spirit of Ultimate, right? Captain's Clause. I just yelled that.
I rule booked a guy at Summer League in 2019. He was claiming something totally insane, and we had a big argument. I went and I got the rule book out in the USA Ultimate app, and I showed it to him. And we had a little scrap on the field, so he was apologetic afterwards. It was all.
If any, you didn't want to just throw your UltiWorld weight around. You didn't just want to list off your Twitter. I
try to avoid that.
I'm just kidding. But if anybody tries to rulebook me, I'm just going to point to Captain's Clause. Say, look, the rules are made up anyway. What are you going to do about it?
I decided it.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're talking new rules for Ultimate. Stay with us. Welcome back to Deep Look. So we're going to talk about rule changes for Ultimate. And first, before we do that, Keith, I am going to just do a quick rundown on the actual current rules that, by the way, are set to expire at the end of 2021. We're supposed to be getting new rules updated every 2 years. Now, whether USA Ultimate will actually make a change starting for 2022, I don't know, because we haven't even really had a chance to play with this rule set yet, besides for a couple of months during the college season.
It'll be extended as a footnote somewhere, yeah. Although I'm imagining like a silly anarchical situation where they forget to extend them and just all rules expire and there's just no rules in Ultimate rules. for 2022.
No observers, there's no rules, Keith.
There's like a 2-week window where there's just no rules.
So here are your current rule changes. So I'm not going to go through all of the rules, obviously, but the primary changes that went into place at the beginning of 2020. Play continues on travel calls if the disc isn't thrown. So if somebody rounds the corner, you call a travel, it doesn't stop play. They just return to the spot where they traveled and ground check the disc. So the stall count is paused until the pivot is reset. So basically, it just takes away that advantage, turn the corner or take too many steps situation without actually halting play. That's probably the biggest overall change. Players can now seek the perspective of teammates on the sideline or use officially designated video footage to make calls. So if there's a big screen, up at a stadium and you watch the replay, you can use that to help you make a call, like on in out or something. And players can also ask the sideline what they saw. That used to be disallowed, of course, in USAU rules. Soft caps are now +1 and play to that score as like a cap. It's sort of in the whiff-diff style. And there's also a halftime cap at this point. So a lot of times organizers may now choose to just use a soft cap, where when you get to the cap, you add 1 to the highest score, and then you're playing to that number. And that means that the winning team has to score to win. You can't just run out the clock. Offsides rules are now changed. If the pulling team goes offsides, which is typically what happens, the receiving team can now choose to play the disc. They do not have to take a repull. And if this, the first offsides means that the disc goes to the brick mark, second and subsequent offsides go to midfield. But you can just choose. There is no stoppage or repull. You just take it. Contact is no longer required in order to call a dangerous play. I'm not going to get into the details of that one, but there are specific kind of rules about that. The time between points has been reduced from 90 to 85 seconds. If you take a timeout when you don't have one, it's now just +3 to the stall count instead of being an automatic turnover. And there's new hand signals for calls and resolutions, kind of like we've seen at the international level. So that's the quick summary, Keith.
I genuinely think if you'd quiz me on that, I wouldn't know, and I'm someone who should be in the know. But these are rules we basically haven't played with. So
that's right. I'm most excited. I mean, the travel call rule is great. I'm super in favor of rule changes that improve the flow of the game without really having a major cost to the competitive fairness. And a lot of these things are just sort of obvious things that should have been changed 5 years ago, but haven't been. So in a lot of ways, I think the changes that were made back in 2019 for the start of 2020 were pretty conservative. And so today we're going to look at some more changes that are less conservative, including some that are way out there, some kind of radical rule change ideas, and talk about them. So Keith, we've got a lot of responses. Why don't you grab one? Let's chat.
All right. I'm basically just going to pick out of a hat here for ones that are interesting to me. Okay, how about this one from Alex Rubin in the Ulti World Discord? College basketball style possession arrow for any contested foul with a discussion that lasts longer than 30 seconds. Presumably you could choose some other length of time that is appropriate, but a possession arrow that resolves extended disputes just flat out. What do you think?
Well, I think it's kind of nice in theory until you actually think about how it would work. Imagine, early in the game, maybe there's very few consequences to that, but in a late game situation, you might have a scenario where one team has a very strong incentive to make a call, even if it's bad, because the arrow's in their direction and they're going to get an automatic turnover, basically. So I don't think that would really work out. I do like the idea of trying to find ways to get teams to come to an agreement more quickly, but I don't know if this particular one would work in practice, even though it's kind of nice in theory.
It does add kind of a weird mini game. Like I'm picturing people, like a college student trying to fill in the extra word requirement for their paper, like trying to stall for time to see if they can get to the possession arrow when they're making their arguments. But by the same token, those incentives exist right now, right? There are already structures in our rule set that, if people want to basically make bad calls to try and gain an advantage, they can already do that. So if you're the type of person or a team that would do that in the situation with the possession arrow, you're probably already making bad and unfair calls in tight game situations, are you not?
I mean, that's fair. I think any of these kinds of things, you're going to end up with those situations where it's like, well, you could already cheat. But the thing is, this really incentivizes a cheating situation in a much bigger way. A contested foul just goes back normally. But if a contested foul, you're on defense, means that you get a free turnover and there's nothing that the other team can do about it, well, I don't really think that's going to play out very well. Sure, it would require someone to take advantage of the rules, but when you create a really strong incentive like that, people may not even think that they're actively cheating and they're still going to cheat.
All right. What do you like from the list?
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, I like this one. Micah Rules 89 on Twitter. Structure scoring more like tennis. 5 sets first to 3. Blowouts are quicker, but teams are never totally out of it. It even provides more opportunity for upsets. We already have a game to 3 mentality, so make it real. And it could be interesting for seeding based on the sets won and would drive more debates about how gameplay would work. What do you think, Keith?
Hey, and then we can really use, getting a break, right? We really can apply that tennis scoring. Although I gotta say, I was talking to somebody about tennis scoring, and why is it so complicated? Why is it It doesn't even increase by the right increments. Sorry, this isn't a tennis rule show, but
let me tell you
if somebody wants to explain the genesis,
why does it
the
go 15,
etymology
30,
of tennis
40?
scoring.
Why does it go 15, 30, 40? It makes no sense. You know why it is? They used to use a clock, and they would turn the hand of the clock from 15 to 30.
And then it was broken, so they just couldn't get to 45?
Instead of 45 as a way of being able to then like show advantage in deuce situations.
Why not just 1, 2, 3, and 4? I don't know. Weird.
Well, I'm telling
but
you
I guess I get it with the clock. Like there was a physical visual that you need to establish. Anyway, I appreciate that. That was insightful. This was something like this was tried out right in the Australian Pro League, right? Didn't they have the small series games? Am I misremembering that?
I can't honestly tell you off the top of my head. I don't know.
Because I think we had a conversation about this, and
Wildwood Finals does this.
Micah noted that it provides more opportunity for upsets, but I think when we logicked it out, it's less opportunity for upsets, right? Because it makes it harder, I think, to achieve an upset because you're reducing the amount of variance by spreading out the amount of times that a team has to win, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is like, how much increased variance do you get by reducing the score that's required, right? It's not 3 games to 15. It's going to be like three sets to 5. So having a lower score is going to increase variance, but having multiple sets is going to decrease it. So I actually don't know how it would play out. I'm sure you could model this with statistics if you wanted to. I think
you might decrease variance. I'm interested in the concept. It's hard for me to quite see enough of the advantages that make it worth switching to / the complications that come with it. I'm not sure that I see enough upside for such a drastic change.
Yeah, I think the issue is that like in tennis, if you had just one big game and there were not sets, you could have somebody come out and be a little off at the start of the match and they automatically lose. This doesn't happen very much in Ultimate. It's pretty rare to see a worse team beat a better team. It's just rare. It doesn't happen all that often. Sure, it happens. It happens enough to be interesting, but it's not like, if you would see so many more upsets in tennis if it was one match to 11 or something, or, you name the number, instead of multiple sets to 6. So I think that, having that ability to say, all right, reset, we're going to come back out and we're going to, we got to win this set now. I think it could increase the excitement of the game. I don't know that it would necessarily change a lot of outcomes.
Well, speaking of changing outcomes, how about this one? We're talking about, increasing variance, helping maybe for some comebacks or something like this. This came from Tim H. Vines on Twitter. If a team is 3 or more points behind, they always receive the pole.
I would love some sort of experimental tournament or league that tried this. I mean, it's a cool concept. In theory, it's going to keep games closer. I guess, is it fair? No, it's actually not. There's like no sense of fairness in that structure. And I'm trying to think, like, is there any other sport that would like work like this? I don't think so.
I'm sure there's something out there somewhere, but I don't know what it is. I mean,
obviously, the game already balances somewhat because when you score, you then have to pull. So if you're behind and you keep getting scored on, you do keep receiving the pull. If you then also got to get the disc after you scored, if you were behind by enough points, sure, that would increase comeback mechanics. I think it could be a fun thing for one of the semi-pro leagues to experiment with. I don't know that anybody would actually get behind this because it's too, it's just too much putting your thumb on the scale for the team that's behind.
It's a fun idea, but I think it would lead to less comebacks and more just like overly long games where it normally might be a blowout. I think blowouts would still mostly be blowouts. Like the other team just isn't going to score enough for it to matter. But I think that when one weaker team is losing and they're on way to losing like 15-10 or whatever, it's just going to make the game longer rather than incentivize a lot of comebacks, I think.
All right, let me give you one. I don't even know if this is in here. It probably is somewhere. This is one that I feel like really strongly about personally. We need to introduce a new disc for windy games. And I could not feel more strongly about this at this point after playing a lot of disc golf over the last year, and I've been playing disc golf now for like 5 years. I really see, when it gets windy on the disc golf course, you change discs. You use a disc that has more stability to deal with the wind, because an understable disc, like an Ultra Star, simply does not fly correctly when you throw it. And I was out the other day throwing Ultra Stars around, and it was windy, and throwing into the headwind, it's like impossible. It's impossible. I mean, I have a lot of respect for those players who have really mastered the ability to throw 40 yards upwind with an Ultra Star, but you could count them on one hand. And if we change the disc in those situations, we would just improve the quality of competition in the wind. I really feel strongly about this. There are trade-offs, because if you used a heavier disc or one with more stability, you would make throwing downwind potentially more difficult. But I don't think it would be nearly the problem that throwing upwind is. And I think in a lot of ways it would just make everybody feel like they were playing with a normal quote unquote disc by switching to something with more stability in an upwind scenario.
In reality, like, how noticeable an effect do you think, the kind of disc that you would propose to use, something that still flies reasonably well when going downwind, or if the wind dies for whatever reason, how much of an effect do you think a person would actually feel throwing upwind with a disc that has the type of stability that you're arguing for?
It would completely change. It would completely change the game. You would be able, in theory, you would be able to throw on a normal release angle and have the same correct flight pattern. Whereas if you try to throw, with a normal release angle with an Ultra Star into a 25 mile per hour headwind, it's going to flip over like a paper plate and, not even come close to reaching its target. You have to throw it with extreme amounts of inside out in order to get it to fly properly. And even then it's difficult. I think it's hard to know without actually trying it out with an actual disc that's designed to be more stable or add extra weight, which is going to increase stability. But I think, as anybody who's thrown in the wind knows, it can feel almost impossible at times. Like a strong headwind, I basically can't throw an upwind flick more than 15 yards, and maybe I suck. But I think that's what a lot of players feel when it's really ripping. Like I often feel like I can't even have a good grip on the disc.
Well, the reason I ask is because I think many people, an Ultra Star or a similar disc is the only one they've thrown. So they might not really. I'm trying to give people a real sense of how big of a difference this would make. And do you think it would be something where it's decided on at the tournament or for the day or by the point or by the game?
That's a good question. I would think, captains would probably have to agree, but I think the rule book should probably say something like, if winds are over X miles per hour, captains have the option to switch to Y disc, or you could even specify it. There's nothing saying that you couldn't. I mean, already in the rules, captains can agree to use a different disc. I think maybe at every event except nationals potentially. But it's not like this technology is unknown. I mean, Discraft has a whole line of disc golf discs that vary in stability in a ton of different ways, and there is no reason that they couldn't make an Ultra Star OS overstable, which is a disc golf term. So imagine it this way, Keith. If you threw an overstable Ultra Star like you throw a normal Ultra Star on a non-windy day, the disc would not flip up as much. It would stay on the angle that you threw it. And, if you're a right-handed backhand thrower, it's going to finish far to the left. Anybody who's played disc golf will know what I'm talking about. So it would be like that. But into a headwind, the effective speed of the disc goes up because the headwind is essentially increasing the effective airspeed, and that's going to cause that to turn and flip up to a normal angle, as opposed to doing what an Ultrastar does, which is just flip over completely and it's gone.
I'm in favor of experimenting with ways to negate the impact of wind on the game, because we all know that there's a point where it becomes unplayable, and any disc eventually that continuum will still exist. But the more conditions that we can make playable with changes in equipment, since we can't change the conditions, let's control what we can control, and try and make the game. I'm open to experimentation with this, and it's the kind of thing that people will complain about because they're not used to it. But once we get a little used to it, like give it a real honest try and see if it makes the game better. Because man, the feeling of showing up to a tournament you're super pumped for and it's horribly windy, and you're like, wow, we're not going to actually play Ultimate for the next 14 hours over the next 2 days. That's horrible. It's one of the worst feelings in Ultimate to me.
The game literally breaks down, even for elite level players. I mean, we can all remember Pro Flight Finale. I know we try not to, but Pro Flight Finale in Blaine, whenever it was, 2015 or 2016, just literally unplayable.
There are even points in Sarasota that are like
true,
not even worth watching. There are points at the college championships, but even down the line, I think is where, how many teams have been stuck at conferences or regionals playing in 20-minute points because nobody can complete more than 3 or 4 passes.
Yeah. And equipment is just inappropriate for the conditions. It just is. I mean, shout out to those players that have learned to really comfortably throw in that kind of wind. It's a very impressive skill, but I still think that it proves the rule that the disc is not meant for those conditions. So,
Charlie, do you want the next radical rule, or do you want the Woj bomb?
Hit me with the Woj bomb.
Victor Oladipo is going to be playing for the Miami Heat.
Wow.
Traded for Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk.
Wow.
So really the Heat just getting out on. I don't really get it. The Rockets, I don't know if they're getting any future assets or not. Maybe it just hasn't been reported, but it's better than the Daniel Tice and Marquise Chris getting traded in separate trades, but a little more exciting than that. But there you go. There's your mid-pod Woj bomb. Speaking of the Heat, let's start up the Heat with some OT rules. How about that? Some overtime rules. So this one comes from our own European editor, Ravi Vasudevan, who says, keep win by 2, but if the game gets to 15-15, go to a penalty shootout. It's 2v2, and you only get 1 throw to score. The disc starts X yards out, whatever number you want to say. But players have to constantly rotate, and they have to do both roles. So you have to throw and then cut, and on defense you have to mark and then guard the cutter. So you keep the same matchup. You make the stall like 3 or 4 seconds. Each team gets 5 possessions like that. If there isn't a clear winner, you keep alternating until there is one.
You only get 1 throw?
1 throw to score.
Wow. Okay, well, the 2v2 mini people in Seattle are salivating right now.
I like this more with 3 throws, I think, or something like that.
I do too. This is definitely radical. It's the kind of thing. It's like, yeah, I would love to watch it sometime. It'd be fun. There's no way this is coming to Ultimate, but the concept of having like sort of like an individual one-on-one competition like that, sort of like what they do in hockey, where they go down to 3-on-3 for overtime. I mean, I actually would rather see that. 2v2 is so fluky and weird, but I think going to mini, basically going to like hockey style 3v3, and you start at the brick mark, and you have unlimited, possession, but if you turn it over, that's it. And maybe there's a shot clock or something. That I think could be more fun.
That could actually be really exciting. I mean, I've tried to think about ways to do some sort of shootout style, or even anything really in Ultimate that feels like a one-on-one, because it's kind of hard to come up with something that feels like it encapsulates multiple facets of Ultimate while still being a one-on-one competition. And this gets pretty close with this 2-on-2, but I think it might be more exciting to do red zone mini, as a way to finish off games that feel like they could go on for a long time. I have another alternative OT idea for you.
Okay.
There's a couple of these. There's a couple of different versions of these. So this, if I remember correctly, I read this in like a Sports Illustrated article about potential future rule changes for various professional sports. And this one was suggested for football, which was the idea that for overtime, that the leaders of the teams would bid on how far away from the end zone they could start a possession and score. So you just keep proposing distances until one team's like, okay, I don't think I can score from that far out. You can have the ball. You can do that in Ultimate, but instead of distance, number of throws. And the reason for that, rather than distance, is because I think at high levels, you would just take possession no matter how far away it is. It's just so much better. You'd go at the back of your own end zone if you had to get possession of the disc. And that makes the debate kind of uninteresting. But if it was number of throws, if you had to come to the captains in the middle and you could broadcast this part of the conversation so that you get all the spectator entertainment of saying, I think we could score in 12 throws. And the other team's like, I think we could score in 9 throws. And you just keep shrinking that number until someone's like, all right, you got it. It's your disc. Go ahead and take it. What do you think?
I mean, we just don't have any way of tracking this right now, but I do love the idea of having some sort of bid system for overtime. In a way, to me, like overtime situations where one team, kind of wins the flip, it's such an advantage in Ultimate to start with a disc, far more so than in football. The attacking offense is going to score 70 to 80% of the time on average. So having a way, I mean, I would be really curious to see what would happen if you put just the distance rule into play for an elite pair of teams. Like, would it really bid all the way out to the back line? I mean, I don't care how good your offense is. If you have to start with your feet on the back line in your end zone and the defense gets to set up, I mean, that is not a positive situation for the offense. I mean, I think, I don't know what the odds of scoring are from that location on the field, but it's going to be well less than 50% in most cases. So I'm not actually sure that I agree with what you said, that, teams would just automatically agree to take it all the way at the back line if that meant they got possession. I mean, if you believe in your defense, you should feel like that's about as, positive a situation as you can get, particularly depending on the conditions. So sure, the throw limit, that'd be fun. But honestly, I would like to see them actually try the distance rules and use that to decide who gets the disc on double game point.
One thing here is that I do think that this works much better in timed Ultimate. So what you're seeing in the semi-pro leagues rather than the possession-based, the score-based Ultimate that we have right now, because when you get to that point where you're receiving on double game point, it's because you earn that advantage by outscoring the other team for the rest of the game. While in a time situation, both teams scored the same amount of points in the allotted amount of time. So they should have the same opportunities versus, it's a little bit different in this Ultimate. And there was someone else who, had a similar kind of like yardage based or field position idea, something like that, where, you're kind of trading off which one of these things is more important to me. I think one of the ideas was like, it isn't a bid system back and forth. It's just one team picks a distance and the other team gets to pick the who has possession. So instead of even bidding back and forth, it's just, okay, 40 yards out. And then you don't know if the other team's going to say, we'll take the disc or you take it. You're just coming in with your numbers and you go in. Wow. And that's whatever results is what results.
Wow. That's exciting. I like it. I really like it, honestly. I would love to see it tried. I know you'll like this one, Keith. Benji Reese says, gratuitous ground checks are turnovers. Any ground check not after a stoppage. So anytime you're not supposed to ground check and you do, turnover.
This sparked a whole conversation about the terminology of ground check versus ground tap and whiff diff rules, which supposedly are much better about when is it appropriate to execute these things and makes them the same rather than two different definitions. But as I commented in the Discord, I don't think this goes far enough. Ground checks are a poison in our community. Gratuitous ground checks. It shouldn't just be a turnover. You should be banned for a year.
Oh, the
from
player
all of Ultimate.
Oh, for a year. Okay.
Yes, an individual who gratuitous ground checks, just, we're done with you. You're out of here.
Like the security comes out onto the field and drags them off.
Yeah, it'll be like when the cartoon police pull up and they take you away in the paddy wagon. It's great.
All right, here's one from Pavel. If there is no defender between you and the attacking end zone, you should be able to run with the disc until your defender is within 5 feet of you. So if you just blow by everybody, then you just get to run it in. What do you think?
I think that Alex Davis and Cammy Groom are, saying, please give me this rule. We'll score every time. I'm just getting behind the defense. People are playing last back center field. You'll play, everyone's running zone. Can't let anybody get behind you. I think this is a little tricky because, obviously this is very radical. I'm not really sure I get why. I think having a good red zone, being able to finish your possession is an important skill. I think there's some excitement in it, I guess. But how would you imagine someone chasing after you, trying to get within 5 feet, and then the ensuing argument about, well, I was within 5 feet and you kept running or whatnot.
So I actually think it shouldn't be within 5 feet. It should be that you have to be past.
You have to tag
with parallel. No, I don't really like the tag. I mean,
so you just have to get parallel, even not close to them. You can be on opposite ends of the field.
It's like the NBA rule for a clear path. Like you have to be ahead of the player. So if your whole defense gets beat and they catch it, they can then just run it in, unless you pass them. Obviously this is a wacky idea, but I do think it would create very cool situations where it really incentivizes teams not to get beat deep and might open up flow on the rest of the field as a result.
And makes for some really exciting moments. There's few things in sports than when two people are just sprinting in one direction, trying to beat each other in a foot race, that are as exciting as that. That is, we get that every time that there's a long huck and two players really have to chase after it, and that's thrilling. And so you get some of that effect perhaps more frequently or with bigger rewards on the other end of it. And I could see a big moment coming down, the crowd going crazy because somebody busts free deep, and now they're trying to get into that last spot in the end zone after being chased. So, it could be exciting.
With time running down.
Yeah.
Here's a similar, at least scenario near the end zone. This is from Abachkad. If a player catches a disc in the air, it is only a goal if their last point of contact before they jump and their first point of contact after they land is in the end zone. So you're not allowed to jump forward.
No more jumping it in.
Catch the disc in the air and then land in the end zone for the goal.
I guess I'm not against this because I don't think that jumping it in can be kind of cool. It's kind of stylish, but I don't feel like it's necessarily safe or makes the game better. So, I guess I'm not inherently against jumping it in. Jumping it in is cool for Ultimate, less so to me for Ultimate.
Well, it's interesting. I'm trying to think, normally we define where you left the ground as your point of contact, where you are considered to be in or out. So on the sideline, if you jump from in, catch it in the air, and then throw it back, greatest style, you are in. But if you're out of bounds and you jump from out of bounds, catch in the air, and then land in, that's a turnover. So why should this rule be different on the, in the end zone? I guess the argument would be that it's still just the open playing field. It's not, the end zone line just defines where you score versus where it's open play, but it's still all the field of play in general. But it's interesting to think about. I wonder how it would change the strategy. You'd have a lot less of the little jam up the line stuff.
It's fairly minor. I think that you wouldn't see a huge impact on the game. Yeah, you might see a few of those up the line, jam it in kind of scores go away, but you're already seeing a lot of that front cone attack that comes from behind the cone rather than in front of it. So maybe you get a little bit of handler reduction in goals or something. I don't know, but I don't think that we necessarily need. I don't think that jumping it in is particularly good, but I also don't think that it's a huge problem that we need to come up with a solution to. So I'm not against it, but I also don't see a like important reason to institute such a rule. But that's not necessarily why we're here. All right, how about this one? I think we touched on this in our show about radical structural changes, but because we kind of veered off into talking about rules and scoring. But Patrick Stegemeller of Cinephields fame brought this one back, which is Callahan's regain you possession on the next pull. So you receive the next pull after you get a Callahan. The pros for this were that in addition to just being more dramatic, it would make good pulling more important and gives defenses the incentive to draw up specific sets to try and force Callahans, which offers an interesting risk reward factor for both offense and defense.
I'm 100% in favor of this, and with no caveats. I actually, the more I think about this, the more I like it. The Callahans are rare enough that it's not going to like break the game, but it also really encourages you to get the Callahan, and as you say, increase the value of pulling, which I think is not being focused on enough by most elite teams. I think that, getting in a situation, increasing the pressure of Callahans, which also it's a great comeback mechanic without feeling like it's a cheap one, like always receiving when you're down by 3 or more. It's like, no, you get rewarded like a safety in football, which obviously this is kind of like coming from the safety universe. And it's also not back-breakingly powerful either. I think this is just a really good, sensible rule where it's like, you so thoroughly beat the other team with that score that now you get to receive. Like they lose their possession completely, and you get a point. I think it's great, honestly.
The thing that I like about this that it touches on is the idea of, right now the only lever we really have to pull for the value of a goal is like denominations of 1. So if we need to add other ways to reward goals, and maybe that means, changing the scoring, but this is a way to do that. So, you're making a Callahan more valuable by adding possession onto it. This actually makes me think of something I've done in some of my scrimmages when we're doing something focused on a specific principle. So maybe we're saying that we're really want to try and be aggressive and get blocks. So you actually score by getting blocks, and every time you actually get the disc into the end zone, you just get to receive the pull again or something like that. Or you get to pull again or something, kind of messing around with the rules in that way. And this kind of reminds me of that because you want to give the incentive for doing something as special as getting a Callahan. It gets a little weird in the wind where you get a lot of Callahans that aren't very interesting, but at the same time, now the team, typically you're going to get those Callahans when you're going upwind.
And
other team scores going downwind, and now they're receiving going upwind. So It's not like they're going to have a massive advantage because they're now receiving going upwind. I mean, you're still probably favored to score in a really strong wind that generates these kind of weird Callahans anyway. This is one of the few that like actually feels doable and like there's reason to do it.
And I guess I struggle to find the downsides here. If a team is in a situation where they're up against the clock and they need to come back in the game and they have to play ultra aggressive to try to get a Callahan, which gives them that extra opportunity to get the possession, then that's great. Like we want to encourage that. And, if people have to play really aggressive and send a bunch of people down into the end zone space, and that leaves a lot of open space in the backfield, or downfield in the deep space, then that's good risk reward. I think that this doesn't overly punish the team that gets, the Callahan scored against them, while also like creating interesting end game scenarios. And I think it's very intuitive too for like fans because it's like, oh, it's like a safety. Great.
Agreed. I think that this one makes some sense and would be like something you can actually execute.
Because another thing we got from Peanut Dweck was that Callahan should be worth 2. And see, I actually like that a little bit less because I do think that overweights the value of the Callahan. Whereas, what's the value of getting the score then plus the pull? 1.5? 1.6?
Maybe even less. I don't know.
I don't know either. But
it's not 2.
2 is extreme. 2 is
which
too extreme. There's no way to score more than 1 point at a time. And I don't think we should change that.
Well, so that's kind of what I was getting at, and I think that's one of the first like rule changes I think we get suggestions on, and there is some of that in here, is the 2-point line. The idea of incentivizing long throws or something like that. And the problem is that like the Callahan's are worth 2, that those rules, I think 2, twice as much value for a goal is too much. And so the way you would work around that is by making goals worth more than 1. So if every scorer was worth 3 or whatnot, and a Callahan was worth 4, something like that, now you're able to play with the increments a little bit.
Sure.
Callahan's are worth 4, and a huck from 60 yards or more is worth 5. Now that huck isn't worth twice as much as a regular goal. It's, worth less than that. So
it's like I always think about when I play like basketball pickup in New York, it's like it's 1s and 2s. And it's like, you should just always shoot 3s because it's double the point of a layup. So
right. If you thought shooting 3s was good in the NBA and the WNBA, it's way better out here.
Exactly. LaMarcus Aldridge going to get bought out by the Spurs. Heat expected to emerge as a front runner to sign him. Interesting.
He's washed.
Heat trying to make it happen.
He's washed. Right. Wouldn't play in the playoffs.
I mean, lots of people talk about 2-point shots. I mean, obviously, it's been tried a million times. I personally don't think you need to continue to incentivize. Like, if you added a 2-point line, it becomes like the NBA, and just everyone just hucks every time. I mean, it just, having played in tournaments where there was a 2-point line, if you go end zone to end zone on the beach, you just end up like dumping it back into the end zone constantly and taking shots. And it's like kind of fun, but I don't really think it like improves the flow of the game very well. I actually think it would probably make things worse and cause a bunch of like weird distortions, because it's just getting 2 is so much more powerful than getting 1 that, like you say, Keith, you'd have to change the overall scoring structure if you wanted to make it work.
And at some levels where one dominant thrower can already take over a game, it like becomes ridiculous. And I think you'd have to change the scoring to make it work. I mean, do we feel like hucks are not valuable enough as is? Like, are hucks undervalued, or is there not enough hucking in Ultimate?
I think there's already a great deal of value in hucking because it's one throw and it's over.
Right.
Like, I think that getting off the field quickly is a huge incentive on its own. And there's also a lot of space in that direction. So if you have a good thrower on your team, you can often throw people open into the deep space. And if teams adjust to play zone or something like that, then you can pick it apart. I think you don't really need to increase the value of hucking. It's not like people aren't doing it.
Agreed. You mentioned Peanut Dweck's idea, and Peanut Dweck sent in a couple of different rules. And one of the other ones was something else that we got from someone else too. So I'll mention that. And that's hand checking. So Peanut Dweck's suggestion was that hand checking be legal. Ultiplanet also said hand checking should be legal, but only if you have the disc. They did spell the disc with a K, which I feel qualified to troll them on, since they troll us on Twitter too. So
wait, what does that mean? You're allowed to hand check the person who has the disc?
It's unclear to me if that's what that means, or it means like, I think they said clear the marks out of there. So I think the idea is that the person with the disc can push people away from them.
I don't know.
I think that's what they're trying to say.
So,
I don't. That seems bad.
It seems terrible. That
happened at a summer league that I played at once. My click league team in college didn't have enough women, so we asked the varsity soccer players from my college to come play with us, who lived next door. So some of them came out, and like one of the first interactions they had was one of the women caught the disc, and just like her mark came over to her, and she just said, "Absolutely not," just full stiff arm. And we're like, "Whoa, you can't do that. You can't do that."
Okay, look, hand checking is already basically legal. I mean, I know technically it's illegal, but at the top level, defenders are putting their hands on the person they're marking in the stack all the time. And, occasionally players might call it, but there's a lot of tacit allowance of that kind of jockeying for position. Forearm on the arm, or a hand check here, a hand check there. I don't know that formalizing that into a rule is necessary or good, because then you're saying like, oh yeah, you can like give somebody the shiver. And I don't really think that that's where we want to go with the game. I think letting players sort of pick their own level of physicality is already perfectly a part of the game, and is, it's not necessary really to establish that in the rules. It's like, oh yeah, it's a non-contact sport except for this one situation.
Maybe it's because I'm O-line through and through. But I know I don't like playing with hand checking. I don't like being hand checked. I don't want to hand check people. So to me, I got nothing for this. I don't think it makes the game better or more enjoyable. I get the idea that like defense maybe doesn't have enough advantages. So like, what can we do to help defense? But letting them hand check doesn't feel like the answer to me.
All right, I have a couple that I think aren't even really very radical that I think we should just kind of do.
Okay.
Here's one for you. Subs on timeouts. This has been long established, I think, by the AUDL as a great rule change. I've made the case many times as to why it improves the value of timeouts and makes the game more strategically interesting. And it feels like we've been right there. I think USAU kind of chickened out, like the rules committee chickened out on actually making this change for 2020. I hope the next time they update the rules, they at least give it a shot.
Again, just a reminder, subs on timeout you got to have either it's one person or everybody.
I agree with that. We've discussed this sort of ad nauseum.
No 3 players or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I personally feel like you should just be able to wholesale sub if you want. And then you set the number of timeouts to make the game as strategically interesting as you can. It just, right now, timeouts are often just wasted. People just take a timeout after 2 points in the game because they want to talk about stuff in the huddle. It's like, I think that timeouts are just horribly used in the sport, and I would like to find ways to make them more valuable. And I think we've seen in the AUDL that it's a really effective and interesting component of the game. And I hope that we bring it to standard USAU rules as soon as possible.
Any other like, this is a layup, just roll with this?
This one is not necessarily a layup, but it's one that I think makes a lot of sense. Making mixed 6-on-6 instead of 7-on-7 to avoid the challenges of having to deal with 4-3-3-4 and, just making the game more balanced. I think the downside, of course, would be that, there's just fewer point playing opportunities. You're going to shrink rosters as a result. But that could be a good thing. You get more teams. We're already talking about how to get more teams, how to get more participation. And I think that, in a lot of ways, the field space, decreasing the poach potential in the mixed division is a positive thing. I don't really see a lot of downsides to going to 6v6.
I'm for it. I think it's a little weird in the field space. I mean, I used to argue that on the AUDL size field, if you want to do a mixed league, you can do 8v8, and that uses up more of that massive field. It might get I think you end up with some of the same effect in standard USA Ultimate if you go to 6-on-6 and you have like way too much space for all of these people. But I do think it might be better actually than the current state where we have to come up with all these kind of wild gender ratio rules.
Yeah, that's kind of where I come at it from. I mean, I just think like, instead we're spending all this time thinking about like, end zone decides, like it's so complicated when it could be totally simplified by going to 6-on-6. And yes, that probably does mean that, 3 or 4 people aren't going to make the roster for the top team in the city. But when that happens wholesale, I think you end up with new teams, more overall competition. Like, do we really need to have 27-person rosters anyway? I think we're already starting to see that number tick down. We're going to see it go down further in the future. And there's just too many players riding the bench in Club Ultimate right now.
We could also just, I'm okay with just 4 women matching players, 3 men matching players all the time. That doesn't really bother me, to be honest.
Sure. I think that there's just like practical problems with that, given that there's just more overall male players generally available for making club teams.
Sure, they can go start other teams, But
That's fair.
if you're really in the business of trying to come up with equity, I think that would be a better system than just 7-on-7 weird rules.
I mean, we've seen in the data over the years that there's clear disparities, even with the new rules, between sort of usage rate between men and women in mixed, and whether or not that's a problem, I think is up for kind of participants in the mixed division to decide. But certainly going to 3-3 is going to make that less of a problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, almost by definition.
All right, so a couple other ones. Here's one that I think is kind of quick, and there's one that I have for me.
Okay.
The opposing team gets to select an injury sub for non-contact injuries. No more Max Dad telling you to go down, and you just get to sub in whoever you want. If somebody goes down on a non-contact injury, other team gets to pick who's coming in.
So you just get to select the worst player on their roster to come on the field?
Sure, if you know who that is.
I like the idea behind this one, but I think in practice it's not going to work very well. The injured dude has to come out on the field and hobble around. I do think that the injury substitution situation should get thought about a little bit more. It seems broken to let teams sub on a great player after you've gotten the turnover because you said that your hamstring cramped up. It's in a way, it's like what we were talking about earlier with what was the first thing we discussed?
We talked about how you could abuse a possession arrow.
The possession arrow. So I feel like it's kind of a similar situation. I mean, yes, again, teams have to actively take advantage of it, but I think it does happen.
Well, I mean, if you're the worst player in your team should be able to come on the field. That's what.
Here's a take for you. This is a radical idea. If there's an injury, you don't get to replace the player until the following point.
You just got to play it out.
You got to play down.
That's my fear is you don't want to make it so punitive that people try and play injured. I think that's
what
I think you want to avoid.
Rule exists as it does today. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a tricky one.
All right, how about this one?
I like the injury rules in general, though. It's everything goes back to the point where the injury happened. So somebody falls down and cramps up when they're 25 yards behind the player that they're guarding, who's going deep, and the disc has to go all the way back, even though they were clearly totally beat. That makes no sense. I feel like there should be some sort of continuation or advantage rule in injury situations, especially when it's non-contact, like you say.
Basically anything in Ultimate that requires you to rewind and try and go to the exact place you were when something happened, I think stinks. We're so bad at it. If you ever actually watch people try and go back to where they were whenever whatever occurred, they're never in the right place. It's a disaster. It's ridiculous to ask people to try and do it.
Well,
we're not equipped for it.
Again, the AUDL has changed that rule, and I think it works quite well. You're allowed to move on after fouls and stoppages and things.
That's one that I know you're for, and I want to come back to that. What about this one from Patrick Stengmeller? Ban zone, no more zone. What do you think?
Well, defining how you would say what a zone is or not is going to be a big challenge. No, I don't think we can do that. I mean, again, I get the idea behind it. I think mostly players need to get better at throwing, and then zones will become less prevalent.
There is nothing I want to do more when I step on an ultimate field than play against a zone on offense. So I hate it.
There it is.
Don't take it away from me, Pat.
So you get to just walk around as a handler. Oh
yeah, and you get to. It's like all of the things I do that are usually really boring suddenly become really cool. It's like, wow, great swing around the cup, and it's like, yeah, now it looks sweet.
Wow, awesome job at the ratchet position.
Yeah, great chisel right there. It's like stuff that people usually ignore. It's suddenly cool. No, don't take that away. I need that. How about this one I got another one for you from TK.
Okay.
So this is another one where you can earn 2, but you really got to pay the price for this one. You can go down 2 players on an offensive possession, but scoring is worth 2. If you wanted to make it even more risky, you could say either team scores. It's worth 2.
Ooh. I mean, again, I don't really like the idea of making points worth double current points. I would almost for sure, you would definitely see teams choosing to go to 5 players if it meant having a chance to score 2 points.
Oh, really? I'm kind of on the other end of that. I think it would be fairly infrequent. I think it'd be really hard to score 5 on 7.
I've played down players at Summer League so many times. Often you play your best ultimate because it's the same people out there just going out there and you know, the other team tries to put a poach in the lane and they just always end up out of position. I think you increase the space by reducing the number of players on the field, and that can actually be kind of a big advantage at times.
This is true. I have been on and against many a Summer League team that has played worse when up a person than
and how infuriating is it when your team has 7 and you're playing the team with 6?
Everybody overthinks it. Everybody's trying to come up with, how do we use the 7th? We got this extra body. What do we do with them? You're doing weird zones and poaches. You're shifting your matchups. Just play and have one person poach deep. Like, it's not a big deal.
It's true. I think that is the optimal strategy. Just have a last back. But I mean, yeah, I think I like this concept more with like wind rules, where like the offensive team going downwind has to play down a player. Like always.
Yeah, this came up. I mean, it's not quite iced coffee only, but for those deep in the know.
Shout out to Sean Childers.
The iced coffee rules, but yeah.
Okay, so I think we're going to continue our conversation on this, but what we're going to talk about in our subscriber bonus segment is picks, the pick rules. It seems like a much needed overhaul. I have some thoughts that I'd like to share. We have some folks that sent some things in about picks. So we're going to talk about those options in our subscriber bonus segment. You can become a subscriber for less than $4 a month at ultiworld.com/subscribe. And you get access to our subscriber only newsletter, exclusive articles, video content. If you're a full or plus subscriber, you can join our Discord, which has been an awesome place to talk Ultimate over the last COVID 12 months. So check it out and join us there.
If you're interested, if you're really interested in experimental rules, Boston Ultimate, led by Ari Jackson, the coach of Brute Squad, did do a scrimmage with experimental rules that included some of these kinds of ideas. They had 20-minute running clock halves. I think it was actually 25, and they shortened it to 20 during the game. They had alternating 7-on-7 for women and men. They had movement during stoppages, penalties for yardage, 7-second stall, which is another one that we didn't mention, but I think it's one of the most common things that people say they want to see adjusted is the stall count. Subs on timeouts. So among other things. And there's actually an article and a video of both the full game and a cut down portion. And you can find that actually on the site. If you search Boston Ultimate Experimental Rules on the site, there is a post about it.
Check it out. For Keith Raynor, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look.